Okay, let's unpack this. We've got a truly intricate situation brewing around the Unification Church right now.
Hmm.
Some really serious allegations, bribery, potential misuse of significant funds coming to light.
Yeah,
It's like untangling a bowl of spaghetti, honestly, and that's exactly what we're aiming to do in this deep dive.
that's right. We're going to, well, delve into these recent legal complexities, the accusations facing the Unification Church.
Right.
Our focus today is pretty sharp. Understanding these bribery allegations and, the chain of events that brought them out.
And to get a solid grip on this, we've been digging through some key documents. We've got parts of a PDF, Aereo.pdf.
Right, the issues concerning the Unification Church one.
Exactly. Gives us kind of an insider's look. And we're piecing things together with a news article from Iran.net, plus another recent report that adds even more layers.
Yeah, definitely more layers. Our goal here is straightforward for you listening. We want to clearly lay out the main allegations, trace the steps of the legal actions, and pinpoint who the key players potentially involved are.
Think of it as your shortcut, basically.
Pretty much. Trying to understand this complex situation without getting totally lost in the weeds.
So let's set the scene. Some events go back a bit, but a big moment seems to be February 2025, though the first legal complaint was actually earlier, right?
Yeah, that's right. The initial phase really kicked off when Kim Sang-min, who heads the civic group Justice Solidarity, lodged a formal complaint. That was back on March 22, 2024.
Okay.
Now, it's important to get this. It wasn't based on his own digging, but rather on info provided by people aligned with Chung Won-ju. That's key context.
Right, the source matters. And who was actually caught up in this initial complaint? Sounded like quite a few names.
It was, yeah. The original complaint named 6 parties: Han Hak-sha, Chung Won-ju, Yoon Young-ho, Kim Sik-bayong, Park Jin-young, and a law firm, Kim & Associates.
And
The legal grounds were a violation of the Act on Special Measures for the aggravated punishment of specific crimes, basically.
Yeah.
A heavy-duty law for serious stuff, specifically bribery.
Okay, so 6 names, bribery charges. But then looking at that document, the non-prosecution decision, it narrows things down quite a bit.
It really does. What's striking is that document indicated only 2 individuals are likely to face legal consequences directly linked to the bribery itself.
This 2? Who?
The first is referred to as Han TM in that PDF source we have.
Yeah.
It translates, and is generally understood as the only begotten daughter, TM.
Okay.
This individual is accused of being the one who directly provided and actually ordered the payment of these lobbying funds.
Yeah.
The bribe money.
Gotcha. And the second person?
The second is the lawyer, Park Jin-young. He's accused of receiving, handling, and then transferring these exact same lobbying funds. The decision suggested the other 4 initially named, not deemed directly involved with the actual money changing hands for bribery.
That's a pretty significant shift from 6 down to 2. So to really get why these bribery allegations even came up, it seems like we need that backstory, especially about this lawyer, Park Jin-young, and some earlier legal fights he was in.
Exactly. You nailed it. These bribery allegations didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They're deeply, deeply connected to things Park Jin-young did before.
Like what?
Well, around July 2018, Park Jin-young actually stepped down as the legal counsel for Hoon EM.
Okay.
And this resignation. Reportedly, it stemmed from a big disagreement about her testimony in a lawsuit involving the U.S. branch, UCI.
Ah.
Apparently, Chung Won-ju and Yoon Young-ho were pushing for a certain angle in that testimony, and Park Jin-young just wasn't on board.
And that wasn't the end of his involvement with them, was it? He kind of turned the table.
He absolutely did. After resigning, Park Jin-young went on the offensive. He accused Chung Won-ju and Yoon Young-ho, plus Choi Yoon-ki, who chairs the Unification Foundation, accused them of breach of trust, which, basically means misusing your position for personal gain, essentially embezzlement or misappropriation.
Okay, what was the specific accusation?
His claim was that they had illegally loaned a huge sum, 7.3 billion won,
Wow.
from the Unification Foundation, mind you, to their own private company, HJ Magnolia Group. And this started back in November 2017.
So Park Jin-young is basically saying they treated church money like their personal piggy bank. How did Chung Won-ju and Yoon Young-ho take that?
Oh, they didn't take it lying down, that's for sure. They fired back with their own counter-lawsuit against Park Jin-young.
Of course, what did they accuse him of?
They hit him with fraud, breach of trust, and violating the Attorney-at-Law Act, the rules for lawyers.
Okay.
And these accusations were tied to lawsuits. Park Jin-young himself had started cases like Y-22 Central City. stuff aimed at getting back what he claimed were misappropriated public assets.
Right.
Their argument was basically that he'd made false promises about winning these cases when he hired the law firms.
It really is like a legal soap opera. So how did that particular fight end?
Well, here's a twist. The Unification Church actually withdrew all their complaints against Park Jin-young.
Really? When was this?
April 4th, 2023. And this led the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office on May 2nd, 2023, to decide not to prosecute him. This was after a pretty long investigation, like 5 years.
5 years, and then they just drop everything. That feels significant. What does that imply?
It strongly suggests, at minimum, an implicit nod from the Unification Church that maybe Park Jin-young's actions weren't criminal like they first claimed, or at least they couldn't prove it.
Okay.
And this whole situation, this withdrawal, really sets the stage for how these new bribery allegations, the ones we're focused on, actually surfaced.
Right, okay, so that whole saga with Park Jin-young is crucial context. Now let's connect back to Kim Sang-min and Justice Solidarity. How did they get wind of these new bribery claims?
Kim Sang-min found out from a report. It was published by the online news outlet Iran.net on March 22, 2024.
And what did that report say?
It basically brought the Unification Church's previous accusations against Park Jin-young back into the spotlight.
Okay, wait. So the fact that the church had accused Park earlier became the basis for these new allegations against others. That's quite a turn.
This is where it gets really interesting, yeah. Because during that long investigation into Park Jin-young...
The 5-year one.
Exactly. The Unification Church, remember, they were the alleged victim of his supposed fraud back then.
Right.
Well, they told investigators that Yoon had provided lobbying or bribery funds to Park Jin-young.
Okay.
Their argument at the time was that this payment was just part of Park Jin-young's bigger fraudulent scheme.
But Kim Sang-min looked at that same statement and saw something completely different. Like, not fraud by Park, but something else.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Kim Sang-min read that statement about ODM paying lobbying bribery funds to Park and didn't just see it as evidence for the old fraud case against Park.
Uh-huh.
He saw it as an admission of bribery itself, specifically the act of giving a bribe, possibly to someone in the judicial system.
Oh.
So in his view, this was a totally new, separate charge. Nothing to do with the old breach of trust or fraud claims against Park. It's almost paradoxical, right? The group trying to prove fraud might have accidentally confessed to bribery.
That's incredible. And the PDF we looked at, it even hinted at how this info might have gotten to Kim Sang-min.
Yeah, the PDF speculates, and it is speculation that the information probably came from sources close to Chung Won-ju.
Ah, the internal politics angle?
Exactly. The thinking is it might have been a strategic leak, part of the ongoing power struggles within the church, a way to potentially undermine Boninam.
Makes sense. So bringing us up to date, where does the investigation into these bribery allegations stand now? This is February 2025 we're talking about.
Okay, so as we said, Kim Sang-min filed that bribery complaint against the 6 individuals, including Han Diem, with the Seoul Northern District Prosecutor's Office back on March 22, 2024.
Right.
The investigation itself is currently being handled by the Gyeonggi Nambu Provincial Police Agency. And while, maybe things seemed a bit quiet in 2024, we have seen questioning of the accused actually begin here in 2025.
Okay, so the wheels are turning, albeit maybe slowly. Who's actually been questioned so far?
Well, reportedly, the law firm Kim & Associates, they've been questioned.
Okay.
The police are also apparently coordinating schedules with Park Jin-young to get his statement. And the other accused individuals have been formally notified they need to come in for questioning too. Dates are being sorted out.
And there's still enough time for this investigation to proceed legally?
Huh?
Thinking about, statutes of limitations?
That's a good point, yes. Generally, the statute of limitations for bribery is 7 years.
Okay.
However, if that special act on aggravated punishment applies to the person who received the bribe, it could potentially extend to 10 years.
So plenty of runway still.
Yeah, either way, it looks like there's still a significant window for the investigation to play out.
Okay. Now, shifting gears just a bit. Our sources also talk about these other related situations that have popped up. This whole Gunjin Gate thing and allegations about official development assistance, ODA, to Africa.
Yes, these are definitely separate sets of allegations, but they involve Yoon Young-ho again and claims of, improper influence on government affairs.
Okay, tell us about the Gunjin Gate.
So there was this post on a Don Cafe site, February 8th, 2025. It brought up accusations that Yoon Young-ho allegedly tried to give benefits to the presidential couple through someone known as Gunjin.
Benefits like what?
We're talking luxury items, bags reportedly, and even a necklace valued at 60 million won.
60 million won for a necklace. Wow. And the Post suggested some serious finger-pointing about who is ultimately behind this.
Yeah, the reported testimony suggests that when Yoon Young-ho was questioned about this, he allegedly tried to shift the blame, the responsibility, onto President Han Hak-cha. And furthermore, there was a search warrant mentioned, reportedly lifting 5 specific things the Unification Church allegedly wanted from the government.
Like what kind of things?
Things like acquiring the YTN News Network, getting a UN fifth office hosted in Korea, involvement in the Mekong River Development Project. Big stuff.
Definitely big stuff.
And the prosecution's investigation seems really focused on whether those expensive gifts, particularly, were actually given to Kim Keon-hee. So you see this pattern, right? Alleged improper influence, potential misuse of funds extending now towards potentially high-level government connections.
Yeah, it definitely broadens the scope. And this seems to connect somehow with these more recent allegations about ODA, the aid money, going to African nations. How do those link up?
Well, there was a news report, May 1st, 2025. It brought forward more allegations of lobbying, but this time focused on South Korea's financial aid, the official development assistance specifically for African countries.
Yeah.
And the individual named as Yoon Mo in that article, widely believed to be the same Yoon Young-ho from the Gunjin stuff, is now suspected of also lobbying for more ODA to go to Africa.
And the numbers. Did they actually show a big increase in aid to Africa recently?
They did, yeah. The data cited shows a really substantial increase, like 63.5 billion won more in ODA for Africa in 2023 compared to 2022.
And how does that compare to other regions?
Well, that's the thing. It's a notable jump, especially when you look at ODA for places like Southeast Asia, Southwest Asia, Latin America. They saw smaller increases or even decreases in that same time frame.
Interesting.
And it's worth remembering, Africa has been a major focus area for the Unification Church. They held a big world summit there back in 2018.
Right.
So you have this striking ODA increase to Africa, plus the church's known focus there, plus these alleged lobbying efforts. It definitely raises questions about what's driving those funding decisions.
And this big jump in Africa ODA, it didn't just fly under the radar, did it? People noticed.
No, definitely not. There was criticism voiced in the National Assembly about it, particularly about the lack of sort of clear goals or detailed plans for how this extra money would be used effectively.
Okay.
Which led to some talk about possible budget adjustments during the review process.
And that news report, did it mention any specific statements or connections that add fuel to these lobbying suspicions?
It did. It mentions an alleged statement by Yoon Young-ho at a Unification Church event back in May 2022.
What did he allegedly say?
He reportedly said that getting financial resources, especially through ODA, was important for achieving the unification of the world, and claimed he'd had a private meeting with President Yoon Suk-yeol and got like a tacit agreement on this.
Wow, okay. Any other connections?
Yeah, an aide of Yoon's reportedly mentioned the church's growing interest in Africa, including plans to maybe move their Africa headquarters to Senegal. And Yoon himself also reportedly claimed he met the Senegalese president, Macky Sall, in June 2022.
And the timing. Yeah. How does this line up with that big South Korea-Africa summit?
Yeah, good point. That summit was in June of the previous year. And that's when the government announced plans for a big increase in Africa ODA by 2030.
Right.
And Kim Keon-hee was quite visible in programs related to that summit, too.
So putting all this together, the Gunjin stuff, the ODA increase, the alleged meetings and statements, what are the main worries here?
Well, the core concerns really boil down to 2 things. One, the potential that taxpayer money, ODA funds, might have been misused for lobbying.
Right.
And 2, the very real possibility of this becoming an international corruption scandal, if these allegations turn out to be true. Someone quoted in the report, Kim Jun-hyung from the Rebuilding Korea Party voiced concerns about damaging international cooperation if aid money is used for private favors.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And he stressed the need to investigate if Unification Church insiders were systematically involved in ODA projects, maybe beyond just Cambodia, where similar questions have come up before.
It is definitely a lot to process.
Yeah.
We've gone through the initial bribery claims, that crucial backstory with Park Jin-young, and now these, frankly, complex claims around Gunjin Gate and the Africa ODA. It feels tangled.
You summed it up well. It's a real web of legal fights and accusations.
Right.
And it's just so important to keep that distinction clear, you know? The original breach of trust stuff where the church eventually backed off Park Jin-young,
Right.
and then these bribery allegations, which kind of ironically seem to have sprung from things the church itself said during that earlier investigation.
Yeah, the irony is definitely there. And it's a crucial reminder for everyone listening. These are ongoing investigations. We don't have final answers or outcomes yet.
Absolutely. That's a key takeaway. The investigations into the bribery claims and the whole Gungeon Gate ODA influence angle, they're active right now. And based on what's surfaced so far, through the sources we've looked at, it feels pretty likely we'll see more developments, maybe more revelations coming out.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it really leaves you, the listener, with a pretty big question to chew on, doesn't it? Considering all these different accusations we've talked about today and the sheer scale of the potential financial and political fallout. What does this whole unfolding situation really tell us about that complex dance between religious organizations and, well, power structures?
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the bigger picture, doesn't it? The broader implications and maybe the long-term consequences when those worlds intersect like this.